BeastNet is brought to you by James Safety Services in partnership with OCR Buddy and OCR Strong. Here we discuss all things OCR and fitness related. Welcome to BeastNet.
Hey everybody, this is Mike with BeastNet, and on this episode I got with me Megan Beck. Megan, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, this is Megan Beck. I am known as the OCR Trainer. If you are in the Spartan world, you probably know me from Facebook. I have been a SGX moderator for, probably as long as I can remember with Spartan. I have been a contributing workout writer. I have written numerous 28-day training plans for all race lengths, from sprints up through beasts. I've written various training guides as to how to train for specific obstacles and, training for mountains, training for running, body weight training. I have pretty much designed my life to be about obstacle course racing. My brand, the OCR Trainer, was developed off of what I was doing with Spartan. And now I teach people how to train for obstacles when they don't have obstacles to train on. So I am an online coach and really an obstacle course racing specialist. I am also a podcast host myself with Middle of the Pack Pod and a competitive obstacle course racer.
Nice. That's a lot to take in. So this is one question I almost ask almost everyone. What got you into the sport? What got you into OCR? Everyone's always got some story of how they just happened upon it one day.
So for me, I was always an athlete. I was always good, never great at athletics. I was born, or I don't know if I was born with a deviated septum or I broke my nose like in infancy to where I just plain couldn't breathe through my nose. But it took about 20 years of my life to figure out that I had a deviated septum. My mom tells me the story of, when she was first holding me, crying to the doctor about, how she couldn't see up my nose, or like my nose looked like it was crooked. And she was afraid that I couldn't breathe, wound up not being able to breathe through the first 20 years of my life. So, I was an anaerobic athlete. I was a gymnast, a cheerleader. I attempted to play soccer. I was decent at soccer, except for the fact that I couldn't run. So like I was the girl who would quickly sprint to the ball, hip check somebody off the ball, and then kick it up, defender, sweeper, stopper, whatever. And as soon as, I kicked the ball up, I would just drop back and completely die because I couldn't breathe. So I got my nose fixed when I was 20, and I had just gotten out of cheerleading in college. I was not doing athletics for the first time ever in my life. It took me a couple of years to really get back into working out, fitness, any kind of staying active after college. And I got into strength training pretty significantly. I was a strength and conditioning coach, certified athletic trainer, and just really wanting to stay active, healthy. So I was strength training, but I felt like I didn't have anything to work towards. I had no goals. And, as a strength and conditioning coach, I know you need cardio in your life. Like that is something that you need to do. And if you are active and athletic, you should have some type of cardio training. But for me, it just wasn't happening. So I found obstacle course racing, and, it gave me something to work towards. But to me, it was like, oh, I don't have to just go and run 5 miles. I can run to the next obstacle. Okay, that's fun. The obstacles weren't a challenge at all. So I was like, I'm going to get ready for this. So I first signed up for a race out here in New England. It was called, it was part of a series. It was the Raid series. So they had a beach raid and they had urban raid. So I was living in Philadelphia at the time, but obsessed with the city of Boston. And my family was in Massachusetts at this point. We're originally from Wisconsin, but we were all slowly migrating out east. It was just shortly after the marathon bombings, and I decided I really wanted to run a race in the city of Boston, kind of to honor the city after the marathon bombing. So I signed up for it, and my sister was going to come up from South Carolina and run it with me. Her sons were going to come and watch. And it was going to be this obstacle course right in downtown Boston. You'd run from Government Center through Faneuil Hall out to Long Wharf. So really the big touristy part of Boston, if you know the city. So it was just like this 3-mile loop around the city. And it was going to be amazing. So I signed up. A week before I signed up, I ended up getting assaulted at a concert, got a concussion. So that was fun. And me, as the athletic trainer I am, do as I say, not as I do, because I then drove up to Boston from Philadelphia and I did not run the race. My sister couldn't make it up, but my dad stepped in last minute. He's definitely not active. So we walked the course. So I was still pretty responsible with it. But we took it really easy. I just went out, had fun, tested out the obstacles, and realized that I was just in love with it. So I came back next year. I actually was in the process of moving to Boston, signed up for the exact same race, finally ran it. I dressed up as a superhero. Me and my nephews made our own little like superhero costume. Awesome. And I scaled City Hall with a cape on. The pictures were incredible. And then a couple months later, I ran my first Spartan race at Fenway Park because I'm also a huge Red Sox fan. And from there,
against you.
Yeah.
I'm from Seattle, so I'm used to disappointment though. So
hey, I'm a Lions fan, so I get it.
Yeah. I'm from Seattle. I'm used to disappointment in just about every sport.
Yeah. Hey, well, you have a hockey team now. Fingers crossed.
They just finished a 9-game losing streak.
I don't know. I haven't been able to pay attention.
They had almost,
by the time they're playing, I'm asleep. So.
It was over a month straight of like losses. It's like, it's the first year. I love hockey and I'm hoping they do better because we usually don't have hockey up here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up with hockey, but I love hockey,
Right.
So
right.
That's why I've always been a Pens fan, Pittsburgh Penguins. But,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't root for anything in Boston. Sorry. But
it's okay. I went to grad school just north of Pittsburgh, so I know a lot of Pittsburgh fans, but I was born just outside of Detroit. So I grew up loving the Red Wings, became a Bruins fan because when my parents moved here, Blake Wheeler was on the team and we knew Blake when he was playing in Green Bay because we were a housing family for the Green Bay Gamblers.
Nice.
So we know a few players that are now in the NHL and Blake was playing for the Bruins when my parents first moved out to Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of drew me in to the Bruins. They also won the Stanley Cup that year. So
and
I
that's
was
one of those things. I've always loved hockey and it was just, no.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I could ever root for in Boston was Big Poppy. Big Poppy. You root for Big Poppy. So
yeah, actually Big Poppy played minor league ball 30 minutes away from where I grew up in Green Bay. And his niece was actually in school with my niece in Green Bay up until, he retired. It was pretty awesome. So
awesome. Yeah.
I'm a huge sports fan, if you can't tell.
I am too. I am too. It's just, it's one of those things. I don't honestly with my obsession now with, OCR and running and now everything else, I don't get as much time to watch it.
Same.
I did end up watching a couple games. I got in the habit of running on my treadmill. And I'll put if there's a game on, I figured out how to watch through Yahoo and I could watch games and I'd sit there on my treadmill watching games. So
I wish I could run on a treadmill, but
I don't do it very often. It's one of those things I get into because living up here in Seattle, I'm sure you have the same thing in Boston where the weather just gets so bad that, I don't want to go outside. Like the last 3 days, it's been so foggy. You can't see more than 30 feet in front of you. And I'm like, I don't want to go run on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're calling for 2 feet of snow on Saturday here. And I'm about ready to text my coach and be like, okay, so 2 feet of snow on Saturday. I'm planning to run, but let's be realistic. I live in Boston. They're not the best at clearing roads and everything else. I can throw on my yak tracks. I can throw on my trail shoes, or I can just run on Friday, run on Sunday, and take Saturday as a rest day. So I'm like thinking in my head, because like even the thought of trying to get the mile down the road to the gym for a treadmill sounds miserable.
But you also see the thing of like, for you, it's one of those, you figure out how can I still do it, just not on that day, where most people be like, well, it's snowing, guess today's out,
Yeah.
So. And see, I have a treadmill in my garage, so I can just walk outside. And I built when COVID started, I built an entire gym in my garage. So, yeah.
Yeah. Boston living, we're all in like triple deckers, tiny apartments. It's virtually impossible. If I go running, it's like I'm going out to the harbor. But if you're trying to run along the harbor during a nor'easter, you're not going to be on your feet for very long. No. So, but me as a coach, I know that if I'm going to hold my clients to, a high standard, I have to hold myself in that high standard. I have a coach because I want somebody to hold me accountable, and I'm going to hold my clients accountable. I get clients that make excuses and say, oh, well, I can't because of this. And I want to be able to say, hey, listen, like I understand, but let's find a way to still get this in, or let's move some things around so you're still hitting everything that you need to hit. Saying, oh, well, I don't like interval runs. Can I just do this instead? Well, no, there's a reason why everything is programmed out. So if it's going to snow on a Saturday and it's going to be 2 feet of snow, I'm going to say, hey, I know Saturday is ideally my run. What can we do to move this around to still fit everything in and still give my body proper recovery?
Which is awesome. That's one of the things you don't see enough, because that's one of the things that's been hard for me. Like I run OCRs, but I've kind of been transitioning a little bit more into triathlons because I wanted a new challenge, but I'm a horrible swimmer. So
okay, yeah,
I've been trying to work on the swimming. I did attempt a half iron, but I killed myself pretty much on the swim. And by the time I came out of the water, an hour and 10 minutes later, I was so exhausted that it was almost impossible to I finished the bike, but I was too late because I was just so exhausted I couldn't move. But I still did the 56 miles, which was brutal in itself. But that's been my hardest part, is up here. There's no pools. Because of COVID right now, any of that are open, there's so many restrictions, it's hard to use. So I've been trying to find ways, like in the summer, I'm right by a lake. But if it's kind of like Boston, I'm not going in that lake right now because I will freeze.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you still get a lot of people that are like cold water surfing right now up here in Boston. Great wetsuits and, hoping that the ocean isn't horrible.
I'm trying to do it. My plan this year is to do it without the wetsuit,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So when I do it in September, I want to do it without the wetsuit. So I don't want to train with a wetsuit if I'm not going to use one in the race. So, but I have found a couple places around here to finally do it. So I'm trying to get, out and doing the swim. And that's the thing, that was my biggest excuse for months. Oh, there's no pools open. Well, okay, look harder.
Right.
And that's kind of what I did. I was like, fine, but I did go through, I've had a conversation with a few people as I hit kind of that winter lull where my big goals were, a beast. I've always wanted to do a Spartan beast. I did Dallas. So I finally did my beast. And then it was kind of I hit a bunch of my goals. And then I'm like, now what? I kind of hit that lull of just okay, I really don't have any. And then all of a sudden, about 2 weeks ago, I started signing up for races again. And now all of a sudden I'm back into but I gained about 25 pounds during that lull. Now it's okay, now I need to get back into the swing of things so I can get ready for, this year. But
bulking season, just use it as an excuse to go hit the weights really heavy and be like, listen, I know I put on a little bit of weight this off season, but I've also put on a lot of strength, and this little bit of weight, it's just fueling my muscles and I'm good. Then, now you're programming the races again, start the cut, get a little more power training. It all just falls right back off.
And that's kind of what my plan is. So I just built, because most of I have some things in my garage that are actually in real gym equipment per se, but a bunch of it's homemade stuff. I made my own medicine balls. I just took a couple a soccer ball and a basketball, popped them and filled them up with sand and then duct taped them.
That's awesome.
Just wrapped them in duct tape. So I have my own. I think one's a 15 and one's a 25. So I made them different. And I'm looking for build a third one that's a little bigger. But yeah. So
hey,
kind of.
When the pandemic started, I was recording a couple of like workout training stuff for whether it was Spartan or me or whatever
Mhm.
else, like filling water jugs with different things to, simulate kettlebells. You can use sledgehammers for like mace type of stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, I made some sandbags. Like there are so many great things you can do with just equipment you have at home and making your own equipment. You never have to actually go out and buy anything. When I get new clients, I actually say, I'm not going to tell you go out and do this. You do not need to go and buy equipment. Tell me what you have access to, and I can program a workout with it. I mean, there are some limitations if you don't have like a pull-up bar. That makes it a little bit more challenging to do
Mhm.
any kind of training for OCR. But if you don't have a barbell or whatever else, like most of us have a Home Depot bucket at this point. I don't care what you fill it with something and let's deadlift it. Let's teach you how to actually pick it up and, walk with it, run with it, whatever.
Yeah. And that's what's cool is, I mean, that's one thing that my favorite things about Spartan. Like I've read Joe's books, the books that he put out. And that was one of the things he said, you don't need a gym, go outside, pick up a
Mhm.
rock, pick up a
Exactly.
log, find things in your environment. I mean, there's stuff all over the place. You don't have a pull-up bar, go find a tree with a strong branch,
Right.
you know, find something. And that was kind of the thing is, that's one thing, like doing Spartan and reading the books, everything else, it got me into the, not just how to deal with obstacles on a course, but also in life. It's like life throws an obstacle at you. What do you do in an obstacle course? You figure out how to get over it.
Hmm.
Same thing in life. Just figure out a way over it. How do you get past this obstacle?
Right. Literally, we just live in this nonstop fight or flight, and we need to stop running from things. We need to figure out how to go through it.
Mhm.
I mean, half of a learning process is becoming uncomfortable, struggling through things, failing. You're not going to learn until you learn how to fail and then figure out what went wrong and improve through it.
Yeah. And that was kind of the one thing when a lot of people ask me why I decided to start doing triathlons. And I mean, it sounds bad to say this, but I've done over 50 Spartan races. And I hit that point where I'm like, I still enjoy them. I mean, like I tell everyone, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy them. But it's like Joe always says, get out of your comfort zone. Well, not to sound bad, but Spartans become my comfort zone.
Oh, especially now that they're like making
Yeah.
obstacles a little more easy. They're standardizing
Yeah.
everything, taking out, even not having as many refs, or they're making more penalty loops. I mean, I personally would love it if they went to mandatory obstacle completion,
Yeah.
because you'd see people actually like really failing and
And
having
train.
to continue to try, continue to train. You'd see so much improvement and it would grow the sport tremendously, all because they said, hey, we're done with the burpees. Like, if
And
you decide you can't do it and you need to move on, that's fine. But the goal is to beat this. It's not to do 30 burpees.
yeah. And that is one of the things I've been a huge proponent of that, of, because I've been done other types of, obstacle course races that had the mandatory,
Hmm.
and if you're in the open heats, whatever, we're not going to get in the whole argument of the open heats. I've
Right,
gotten
right.
that
Nope.
people, that's your race your race, have your race. But if
Right,
you're competitive or elite, you finish the obstacle or you're done.
right.
You disqualify yourself. And that's one of the things I've seen one, and I can't remember which race it was, but it was one, and there was a friend of ours that was in it, and she was in second place, just right there, right behind the first place person. And then she hit some obstacle that and I can't remember, it was like the Tarzan swing or something, and she just, for whatever reason, couldn't get it.
Hmm.
And she ended up finally, I mean, after I think it was like 14 or 15 tries, finally was able to get it. But she went from second place down, I think, like 12th.
Well, you look at somebody like Lindsay Webster when she ran Savage, Ohio last year. She came in with such a big lead, and she had never seen the Savage obstacles before. She had no way how to deal with the cheese board and how to recover after it. That by the time the other girls were coming, she was struggling and struggling and struggling, and she stayed there fighting until the podium was full. And she's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm done. And she just walked off. Like, her job was to hit the podium. She knew that she couldn't finish that. She wasn't going to kick herself for it. She just said, I have things that I need to train now. And, she called it a day.
And that's the way it should be, is because it's not one of those things of, because I know too many people, and I know some of the people that run competitive and stuff like that, the thought in their brain is, well, I'm fast enough, I can make up for having to stop and do the burpees. And I'm like, but that's not the way you should be thinking. The way you should be thinking is, how do I get better so that I can complete the obstacle and not have to do the burpees?
Exactly. And so when I really got into this and like really started building a name, I was just kind of coined as, this Spartan girl. And everybody knew me that I only ran Spartans, which the only reason I was only running Spartans was because Spartan was giving me a season pass for the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
So it just made more sense that I go and I run Spartans than, having to pay money for all these other race brands when I still had to pay for travel and whatever else. And I mean, I'm not fast. I'm not a runner. I accept that I'll never be fast. Like, I'm getting better, but I'm never going to be able to run with the elites. So, I've done decent at age group before, but there are people that don't want to move up from age group to elite, or, there are more people coming, just naturally faster people coming. And yeah, they can probably whip out 3 sets of burpees for 3 failed obstacles while I'm still running a clean race, but, a minute or two slower pace. That I accept that. And that's why I've moved more into the mandatory obstacle completion realm. I mean, I've ran Indian Mud Run twice. I have signed up in the
I've heard
pro
that one's
wave.
great.
It's phenomenal. I cannot say enough good things about Indian Mud Run, especially because it's mandatory obstacle completion, but it's ranked mandatory obstacle completion-esque. So instead of either you beat them all or you're out, it's, you have up to 5 fails to stand on the podium. In order to quote unquote keep your band, you obviously have to finish all of the obstacles. But if you fail one obstacle and you finish, within your time cutoff, but like with a minute to spare, you are ranked higher than somebody who failed 2 obstacles who maybe ran faster than you. Same with 3, 4, 5. So my first year I ran it, there was discrepancy between a volunteer and myself, or a volunteer and the race rules. And then I beat the obstacle per the rules, but the volunteer thought that I needed to end on like the bar at the end of the obstacle instead of just hitting a ring on the final rung and dropping. So it was Nuclear Ninja rings. If you're familiar with it over at Nuclear Races, they had it at OCRWC. Pretty much you go up and down this incline, then decline on rings. So you're swinging across the rings, hooking them in a peg as you go up and back down. You hook it into the last one and you can drop and run. So I hooked it into the last one. I dropped. She's like, oh no, you had to finish on the bar. I'm like, well, no, she's like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, those are the rules. So it was hot, humid. So I'm retrying, and it's just chewing me up. This is one of the first obstacles and I'm getting drained. Another guy comes, does the exact same thing. She's like, no, you failed. And he's like, no, I know Hubie. Like, I ran this last year. This is the rules. So somebody goes, they get Hubie, and he's like, oh no, they're right. So at that time I had wasted 15 minutes on this obstacle, chewing my hands up.
Yeah.
I go through the rest of the course. I single shot everything up until Indian Skull Head Valley, which are really rough skull heads that you have to grip. I end up losing all of my calluses on both hands, on top of those skulls. And I have 20 minutes before my time cutoff. In pro, I'm like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, I don't give up my band. Like, I'm great at obstacles. I cannot give up. They're like, but Megan, you have 20 minutes. This would be only one fail. You could have up to 5 and still be ranked. They're like, you got to go. So I end up, begrudgingly run off, crying, single shot my way through, finish with 1 minute left on the clock. And I end up taking like 5th or 6th out of like 10 pro women. And it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So then I went back this year and my goal was keep my band. So I ended up doing that. one attempt, everything except nuclear ninja rings, which had gotten in my head, finished it on the second time. And it just like completely changed my entire mentality. I love everything about the mandatory obstacle completion. And I think it's definitely the way of obstacle course racing now.
I agree. I'm seeing more and more races go that way. I think Spartan's behind the ball on it. I think they really need to. Like I said, open heat, we're not going to argue that one. That's a whole nother animal, because for years, that's what I did. I did open heat because I was 290 pounds. So I wasn't that good at some of those things. I could get through everything. I had the endurance to just go.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go. I did a marathon in 9.5 hours when I was 290 pounds because I just kept going and I could just keep going. And then right before COVID started, I just started dieting and working out again and running. And then during COVID, I had the time. So I just kept running and I dropped 100 pounds.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And then I went and did my first, I did Vegas last year in Spartan, and I did my first competitive. I didn't win, obviously, but I wasn't dead last either. So, it was a good experience. My goal was I wanted to be under 2 hours on the super, which I was, I think, 150. And then I wanted to be under an hour on the sprint. And I 1 hour and 24 seconds. And that was only because the one obstacle that I've always, I haven't missed, like I've missed twice in like 5 years. And that's the spear throw.
Oh.
And on the sprint, you could look through the spearman and you could see the finish. All there was the monkey bars and the finish. So I always have like a ritual. I grab it, I bounce it off the thing. I have my way of doing it, but I got a rush and I just grabbed it and chucked. And the second it left my hand, I'm like, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
I knew it was bad. And
when it leaves your hands, either it's hitting or it's not.
Yeah,
but
I knew it was bad. So I'm like, dang it. And I went over and did my burpees. But if I had done the way I'm supposed to, I would have had the under an hour. But it was a challenge for me. And then I ended up doing I've done a couple other ones competitive, and I'm doing San Antonio in March. I'm doing competitive there.
Good for you. That is amazing. Sorry, my dog is going insane right now.
It happens.
Boston living. He loves being able to look out the window and bark at everybody that walks by. No, I can completely understand that. So this year at OCRWC, they had first the 4-hour time limit, and the last second, like really the morning of, we all got an email that said we've extended the time cutoff from 4 hours to 5 hours. And I forget what had so there were a couple obstacles that just tripped me up, because again, like my goal this year was I want to keep my band. I had not kept my band at any of the 15Ks before. Like it had really gotten in my head. So I didn't push myself hard on the running, and I didn't really, I took my time on the obstacles. So I made sure that I was good to go, everything else. So as I was finishing up the course, I wasn't really paying attention to time, but I kind of had it in my head, like, I'd really like to finish in 4 hours if I can. And then one of my teammates from the team race, I'm coming in, he's chasing me. He decides to tell me that our teammate dropped out of the team race as I'm coming into the end. And I end up like falling off of Ricochet really randomly, to the point where like I slip off. He's like, what happened? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, but I get back on. I finish up. I hit the bell. I go running over the A-frame. I cross the finish line. I go and I look at my time, 4 hours and 1 millisecond.
Oh,
I'm like, how does that happen?
Yeah, that's always the worst.
But I mean, as somebody who is, diehard mandatory obstacle completion, I know with a Spartan race, like I'm never going to be fast enough. I'll never be really anything great at Spartan because I can't outrun. But like mandatory obstacle completion, I can compete. Like I can step into a pro wave. I can keep my band. I can, I can't chase down the best of them. But if you have us battling it out at obstacles, I can hold my own. And that's what I love. And hearing your story about, challenging yourself, stepping into age group, I think that's what everybody should strive for. We keep saying, in open waves, like, yeah, do your own thing. I completely agree. Run your own race. I do think we need to make sure that open waivers still respect the rules,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because you're not going to play a pickup game of basketball and just grab the ball and walk down the court holding it and shoot a basket. Like, you still have to dribble the ball. So I think there needs to be a certain level of respect for the rules with open waivers.
Yes.
And I think that everybody should at least try once in their life to step into a competitive heat to see how they do against, the rules themselves. And I love hearing people continue to push themselves to that, even if they're not striving for a podium, they're at least saying, I am running Spartan's race, or I'm running Savage's race. I am running OCRWC's race today. I am going to give it my all. I am going to fight for these obstacles, and I'm going to accept whatever penalties come with.
Oh, I agree. And that was one thing I never thought I would do in an age group. And what got me to do it is I did an event in Bend, Oregon. And it's the company called Rise Challenge Events. And they put on some amazing events. And when I got there, I was supposed to have a team, and they weren't there. So I ended up picking up 2 other friends that were there. I'm like, hey, you want to be on my team? And they're like, yeah, sure. So we jumped in and we took off, and we were the last team to leave. And when we come back in, and one of the guys at the thing says, wow, last team out, first team back. And we're like, what? He's like, nobody else has come back yet. You're the first ones. And I mean, where there was like 5-minute increments between teams, and we're like, oh, okay. And then it was kind of that feeling of, hey, we actually won. And then it was kind of, oh, wow. And then what was funny is we didn't think we were going to win, because it was supposed to be, the rules are you're supposed to have 4 team members, and it was supposed to be co-ed. So, and we only had 3. It was me, my buddy, and his girlfriend. And we're like, well, we only have 3 team members, whatever. We didn't follow the rules. But then come to find out, they said we did follow the rules, because we still did as many workouts as everybody else. But we just did it with 3 people instead of 4. So they're like, no, you still followed the rules, because you still did as much as everybody else did, just with less people. So they actually ended up giving us the win anyway. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And then this year we ended up doing it, and same thing. I didn't have a team, so I joined somebody else's, but we didn't have a woman. So we ended up not being co-ed. So we were still the fastest team, but then the other team's like, well, we feel bad because it's like, we knew we weren't going to be, we knew that, the one person that dropped out on both was the, the female runner. So we knew we didn't have a co-ed team, and we knew we weren't going to win. We were just out there for fun. So, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, and that was one that got me into really that one is one that's a mandatory completion, they have it's not cookie cutter. And that was part of my thing too, is I got to a point, I'm so used to seeing the same obstacles. This one they actually have shooting in their events.
Okay.
So yeah, they have shooting, and it was axe throwing at one of them. They have one where you're actually bucking hay. I mean, they throw some really interesting things that, almost real world type things that make it a little different. So that's what I like.
I've been at races. There was one that I shot a paintball gun, one that I had to throw a football. I think that was actually maybe the same race. I think that was Blizzard Blast out here in New England. Rest in peace, Blizzard Blast. But then Highlander Assault, you shoot a bow and arrow.
Oh.
And I'm terrible at that. Oh my gosh. Do not make me shoot any kind of archery, not my specialty.
And I like that when they do something weird like that, because it's one of those things that, I mean, not to sound bad, I mean, I've done, I think 56 or 57 Spartan races, and there's only been a few times where I've seen a new obstacle, and some of those I saw one time and have never seen again.
Oh, like ape hanger or Tarzan swing. If only we could see those at more races. But no, I love.
Well, they've never made it to the West Coast. I've never seen either one.
Ape hanger is at Tahoe.
Yeah, and see, I've never made it to Tahoe. For whatever reason, Tahoe has always been like the wrong weekend.
They have been building ape hanger more out in Europe, but I've seen them build it with only like crash pads underneath. And if you're going to do ape hanger, part of ape hanger is the fact that you're wet. So you have to go into the water and then you have to climb the rope, and your hands could be wet, your feet are wet, you're climbing up onto a wet rope. So, I mean, ape hanger itself isn't as difficult until you get your hands wet and have to swing across with the wet hands and falling
See,
into the water.
I remember originally Spartan had the rope climb was in the water.
Yep.
Because the very first race I did in Spartan was 2015, the Spartan Beast in Montana. And it was what they call the founders race, which I haven't seen in years now. And I think there's arguments on whether it was 20 miles or 24 miles.
Wow.
The whole race. And there was obstacles on that I've never seen again. There's things that they did there that I've never seen again. There was one, they had us doing a log carry through a swamp that was almost like chest high. Yeah.
I miss those days. Like there's these, rumors that there were single lap ultra beasts. And, there was the Tyro over water.
Yeah.
And I mean, even now thinking about Palmerton, like double sandbag carry is gone. You don't see it. What else
they did
are they?
Dallas in the ultra.
They did? Good.
Yeah, the ultra, but only for the ultra runners. We had to do the double
okay.
sandbag.
Oh, that's terrible. Like I remember my first trip out to Tahoe, carrying 2 sandbags, getting blasted in the face with sand, wanting to quit. And it's like, what now? I mean, there are some things that I get, like you shouldn't be doing, like as iconic as the Tahoe swim up at the top of the mountain is, like hypothermia should not be an obstacle. So I'm okay with them maybe not having it right in the middle of the race like it typically is, but like a double sandbag carry for competitive waves, like that is a very much Spartan iconic thing. We don't need to see a Spartan helmet for the sandbag carry at every single race we go to.
Yeah, the once they did it once, now it's been over and over again. It's like, we did it in Dallas, they had that. And everyone's like, why is there so many twists and turns? I'm like, because I'm pretty sure if you looked at it from above, it's a Spartan helmet.
They want that Strava data with the Spartan helmet.
Yeah.
But like they've been doing it since, I think they did it in West Virginia in 2019. They did it in Jacksonville, I think 2020. Like it's been done. And now we're like, okay, what's next? Yeah. Like we want that authentic, rustic Spartan difficulty back.
And that's what I agree. It's kind of that point that rustic, and that was kind of thing. I did the beast, the ultra in Dallas, because I've always wanted to do an ultra, and I almost didn't because stupid me. I'm one of those ones. I packed a whole bunch of races, like one right after the other, and I did the trifecta weekend in Seattle. The next weekend I did the Ironman and DNFs, but I still, did the Ironman the next weekend. The next weekend after that, I did Tough Mudder and cracked a rib.
Oh,
and then 2 weeks later, it was 2 or 3 weeks later, I went and did the ultra. So when I did the ultra, I had a cracked rib.
Oh, yikes.
So one of my running partners was with me. I went to do the ledge, the cargo with the ledge that you have to jump on. And I jumped up onto the ledge. And when I did, I hit straight into my ribs and I fell backwards. And she said she thought I was going to pass out. I was doing that kind of like seeing dark. And I'm like, oh, that was a bad idea.
Oh, yeah. You see, people thought I was crazy because I ran the Fit Challenge 24-hour race the end of October. And then I had like 2 weeks recovery. Then it was Spartan Fenway, which I only ran because, I mean, I live in Boston. It's home. I love the Red Sox. But I wasn't running it because I had any big expectations about it. I was just going to run it. Yeah. I didn't even sign up. I showed up the morning of, like, registered at, on race day registration, went and I ran both days. My coach was like, okay, that's fine if you want to run Fenway, but like it's a training run because you're running the ultra next week in Carolina. So you have to run 3 laps on Saturday. I'm like, okay. So I ran my first lap. I finished up. People are like, hey, you finished 4th. I'm like, awesome. That's great. I have to go run another lap. And then I'm running, I get across the finish line and they're like, hey, you want to celebrate? I'm like, no, I have another lap. And then the next week I went out and I ran Carolina, and that was my first elite race. That was my first Spartan Ultra, but it's like, I wasn't even recovered from the Fit 24-hour race. Technically, I had injured my knee, but I thought, hey, I have a Spartan season pass, haven't ran any Spartan races this year, obviously, then ran Fenway, but I'm like, I'm trained for an ultra. I might as well go run a Spartan Ultra. So I did.
Yeah, but the hard part is, like I said, that. But once I got it, it's like, okay, that was my big goal. That's what I had been working for a while. And now it's like, okay, now what? So
Indian mud run.
I think I'm thinking about it. There's some, because at the end of this year shouldn't be too much traveling for us, because normally we do Hawaii. We go all over the place, mainly because my wife likes warm weather. And we
I
always,
don't
we've
know
had
what that's like.
yeah, we've always had a deal that if we travel for a race, she gets a vacation.
Okay.
So that's because we did one time where I did Vegas, where I flew down Friday and flew back Saturday. And I'm like, this was a complete pain in the ass. I don't want to do this again.
This past year, we drove out to Indian Mud Run and we stopped at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, Ohio's nothing too special. Sorry to anybody who lives in Ohio, but there is like Cedar Point, which is this huge roller coaster amusement park. So you could always go do that. I mean, you could make a trip out of it. It's close enough-ish to Pittsburgh, I guess, if you wanted to go see Pittsburgh, or I don't know. It's like,
and that's kind of it. So yeah, we've tried to find a way to make a vacation out, but we're actually at the end of this year. There's a good chance with my work, what I do, everything. My company's opening an office in Texas. And so I may be moving. And if I go to Texas, then all of a sudden it's so much easier to go to Georgia for some of those events,
yep.
Julie's events out there and stuff like that, because she's got a couple, and
yeah,
the Phoenix races. So
yep. And she's expanding all over the place now.
Oh, yeah, she's doing a triathlon with a mud run the next day, and I'm like, in July, and I'm like, oh, I want to go to Georgia for that. But yeah,
I don't know when she sleeps. I
don't know. She's amazing.
She's a mad woman, and I love it. It's awesome to see.
And her ideas, and I mean, she works with so many different people and comes up with some of the greatest ideas for obstacles. And I'm like, but you're so far away. That's right. Why. But like I said, once I moved to Texas, it's like it's just a quick jump, to a lot of those places. So yeah. Because that's another problem on the West Coast. We don't have Epic Race. We don't have Savage. There's so many races. Green Beret Challenge doesn't come out here. There's so many races that are over there that don't come to the West Coast. And we're like, I want some more races. I want to try some new things. Like I said, I Spartan, I'll probably do a trifecta a year just because I have since 2015, but I don't want to pay for them.
Right.
I've always been street team, or I've had some way to get free races. And that's kind of the thing. Like this year I have 3 free races left, and that's it. But I don't plan on volunteering. I don't plan on doing any of that because I'm kind of over it.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely. But I mean, on our podcast, we put together our, all of the races we would want to run. And like, based on the calendar of last year, this is what our perfect schedule would look like. And we were trying to find races out on the West Coast, and we're like, what is there? Like
Spartan.
There are Spartan races. And like, I went out and I ran Spartan Seattle in 2019?
In the April to September.
And I'm like, oh, I don't want to ever do that again.
What's funny is the September races were always in the exact same spot as the April ones. But there was multiple times that my beast time was better than my super time from April. Because all of a sudden it's dry, like all those places you're going through where there's water like up to your waist, it's completely nothing. There's no water.
Oh, I've heard that. I remember coming off of that course, I'm like bawling my eyes out because I'm so cold. I made the mistake of wearing sleeves, and I had my bleg mitts. And like the second that any of that gets wet, like you're just freezing. So I'm like hypothermic. And my friend who lives out in Washington now, he had a dry rope. I finish up. I'm like, I come off. He sees me. He comes running over, gives me the dry rope. We get in the car. We drive into Seattle, and I'm like stripped naked in the dry robe. I walk into the hotel shivering in the dry robe, completely naked. Like, I just need to get warm. I need a shower, like something. This is insane. I'm like, I never want to come back to Seattle again. No offense. It's like, I can't do this cold, rainy weather. Like, I can do cold, I can do rain. But it was like just the downpours, and it just never stopped.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people kept telling Spartan, why do you keep doing this in April? Because I mean, there's one, I think it's 2018. There's a video of someone swimming through the barbed wire wall because it was that wet. I mean, it filled up with water. And I mean, it gets so muddy and nasty. And then, like I said, all of a sudden in September, you come and do almost the exact same course. And you're like like I said, the beast times were usually faster than the super times because you weren't slipping and sliding everywhere.
I remember standing on the box to get started on beater, and I grab onto the bar, and like I'm short and they only have like the short boxes. So I had to physically jump to get to the bar. I grabbed onto the bar and my hands slid straight off because they were soaking wet, and my feet landed on in the mud and my feet just slid out. I almost hit my head on the box.
Yeah.
It was all just because it was just a muddy torrential downpour mess.
And that's the one thing that, you know, like with Spartan is they've gotten to that point where that's the only difference when you go somewhere. And that was kind of my thing. And I really noticed it in Dallas when I did the ultra. The only thing different between the Dallas race and the Seattle race was the terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. I mean, it was the exact same obstacles I did, you know, a month and a half earlier in Seattle. And then I did, you know, 2 months before that in Hawaii. And it's just kind of like, the only difference is the terrain. I mean, it was really cool to go to Dallas because that's where I'm probably going to be moving is actually Houston. But, you know, it gave me a chance to go to Texas and really see what it looked like and all that kind of stuff and explore it. But it's just kind of like, that's kind of why I'm looking at some of the other ones, why I want to go try Indian Mud Run, why I want to try, you know, and not, like I said, nothing against Spartan. It's just, it's not the rustic Spartan that I started.
Right. Exactly. We want something new. Like I love that Killington, Palmerton, they have signature obstacles. You know, there were specific things about the venues we all started with that it was like, I really love this aspect of it. I mean, I still talk about I think it was 2017, they were at a venue out here in Massachusetts. It was like a Boy Scout camp. And it was just incredible going, you know, there would be a part running along a river. They had the spear throw, like to where the spear targets were like floating in the river, like on buoys. And it's like things like that were cool. Like, you know, one year they ran it one way, the next year they ran it slightly reversed, but they found like new parts of the trail. But now it's like you go out to Tahoe, you know, you're going to run that course either forwards or you're going to run in reverse. They're not going to find new terrain.
No.
The more they go to venues, the more the venues are like, you can only put the dunk wall in this location and you only have 2 or 3 slopes that you can physically run up. No, you can't cut new trails. And it's like, well, okay, what now? And the venues that they're finding now aren't as technical as the authentic venues were, or they can't build specific obstacles. You're not gonna see, you know, the Tarzan swing, the ape hanger. I mean, it's just a matter of time. We're all worried that they're gonna soon get rid of the death march because they're making things easier and easier and easier. And like, thank God they were able to make Killington tough this year. But now it's like, you know, we sit here and say Spartan is making things easier when it comes to obstacles, that they do stupid things like running people up a double black diamond at mile 12 at Killington to where people are on their hands and knees. And, you know, it's physically not runnable, but they're trying to find a way to make it rustic Spartan again, quote unquote. But
then everyone complains about it.
Everybody's going to complain, but it's not, this is difficult because of the obstacles. This is difficult because you're just finding impossible parts of the course. It's not something that's physically challenging us that we want to continue to push through. This is just kind of dumb to do.
Yeah. And that was one thing, like I've done Montana for years. And that was one of the big things in Montana was the terrain was the one obstacle nobody talked about because it is, there's a reason why that was one of the mountain courses because it is straight up and down. I think one year it was almost 3,000 feet elevation gain. I mean, it was insane. But that was one thing we expected. You expected it and you expect, but there was one hill that we called the, you know, and Don's gonna have to bleep this out. I called it the you Hammond Hill because every year he would put it in there because it had and I've told Steve that's what I called it, but it had a spot that looked like it was an optical illusion that looked like you were at the top, you were hitting the top, and then you would come across, and then all of a sudden you realize you're only halfway up.
Yep.
And it was just one of those straight up, like just nasty hills. But the one year that they actually put a sandbag on it, and it was the worst sandbag I've ever done in my life, they basically had to cut it in half the next day because so many people just were dropping their sandbags and leaving them. So they're like, no, I'm not doing this.
Well, that's what was happening at the Palmerton double sandbag carry. You know, you'd get into the age group waves. And so many people signed up for age group for the early start time because, Palmerton, which doesn't really have that much shade in July in Pennsylvania, you're, hot, humid, just dying in the sun if you're starting after 10 o'clock. So we're all going to sign up for age group. Those age groupers would get to the double sandbag carry. They'd take the 2 sandbags. You start at the top of the hill, have to go down and then come back up, which is always worse than, starting going up and then coming down. So they would turn the corner to come back up and people would just drop their sandbags right there and say, I'm done with this. Like, I'm not looking to win anyways.
Yep.
And they would keep going.
And the
yeah. So everybody would drop it. Like people were dropping sandbags there. So then the people that actually wanted to race age group, they weren't getting 2 sandbags anymore. And, then you're left with sandbags all over this mountain.
Yep. Yeah.
So I take it you haven't ran Killington then?
No, because I really haven't gone east yet. And that's one of the Killington's one that I want to do, just to say that I did it. But like I said, most time we stay west. I mean,
Yep.
that because I'm on the West Coast and I don't do a lot of East Coast. But like I said, that was kind of the hope. Once I move, to the middle of the country, then I can kind of hit those a lot easier and start hitting some of those more. Because my goal is to eventually run a race in some kind of race in every single state.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and I've thought about it, and I'm like, I would be okay with even doing a virtual race as long as I did it in that state.
Right.
I just have to do some kind of race, and right now I think I'm at like 7. So I got a lot to do. So
a lot of touring to go, but Killington definitely has those like false plateaus. And that's a good portion of why the Death March is so treacherous, is because it's like false peak after false peak after false peak. So the first time you go, you build it up in your head, like, this is going to be terrible. This is the Death March. It's so terrible. I tell everybody, the Death March is the easiest climb you're going to have at Killington, not to like scare you, but because it's what you build up so big in your head that by the time you get there, really, as long as you don't stop for too long, don't look up, just keep moving, it's not that bad. It can get from, kind of steep, gradual a little bit, kind of steep again. But, false plateau, false plateau, false plateau. After about a mile, you're up to the top of it. But at Killington, you'll get like 5,000 feet of elevation with a couple really treacherous climbs. It is like the ultimate like beast. So it is the beast of the East, but it's probably the most authentic race you'll still get at Spartan. And thankfully they have not changed it too much to take out that authenticity.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard. The ones that I've heard that are tough is Killington's the worst, Big Bear, Montana, and Hawaii.
Okay.
And if you've never done Hawaii, the super and the sprint are easy. I mean, not to sound bad, but they're easy. The beast, they put a whole nother aspect. You end up going up and over the mountain to the other side and then back over. And that's what gets you. There's a single track that if you're not early and you hit that single track later in the morning, you'll get stuck. And the last time we did it, we were on that, or not this last time I did it, there wasn't as many people. We went right through it. But the year before in like 19, it got backed up, and to go like 2 miles took us almost 3 hours through this like single track. And by the time we got to the other side, you're just exhausted from being in that humidity for so long on that single track. And it just wiped out every bit of energy we had. So this year I'm like, we need to go early and get through that single track and get over it. So, cause you get over it, go do a bunch of stuff on the other side and then come back over another single track. So it's brutal. And I mean, I'm not talking like, just walking up, you're pulling yourself up by branches and roots. And I mean, it's a literal climb.
So the ultras have fun out there is what you're saying.
They go twice.
Yes.
That's why when everyone's like, yeah, you should do that ultra. And I'm like, no, I'm fine with doing that once.
I'm strongly considering Montana for my next ultra. Cause I was supposed to get out to Montana in 2020. I still actually have my flight credit to get out there. that I had to cancel. So I'm like, I want to get out to Montana. That's been a bucket list race. It's been, it's just a state I really want to visit because
It's
I
beautiful.
don't get out to the West Coast all that often. Like I've ran Big Bear, I've ran Tahoe. But aside from, those California races, I've ran the Seattle race because it was part of the national series, but I haven't actually spent too much time out west. I mean, I went to Utah. I spent a day there. And then I took the red eye home because my favorite soccer team was playing at Fenway Park the next day. So it's like, I've never vacationed someplace warm. So ideally I wanted to run the trifecta weekend in Hawaii. Now I have no desire because I'm done with trifecta weekends. Like my body just can't take it. I would prefer quality of races over quantity, but I'd like to go out to Hawaii and run a race. Maybe I'd consider the ultra. I do want to run the Montana Ultra. So those are on my list. So we'll see.
And Montana, I mean, Montana's gorgeous. The one thing I say about both Montana and Hawaii, you'll want to die partway through the race. But about that time, usually you come around a corner and you get one of those views and you're like, well, I'm in heaven. So it's okay. Because I mean, both of them are gorgeous. Hawaii is gorgeous. I love Hawaii. Unfortunately, this year I won't be going, but normally we do every year because that's my wife's favorite place. But
okay.
Because that's how she convinced me to go. She wanted me to go to Renew Our Vows. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go to Hawaii. That's not good. I don't want to. And she's like, there's a Spartan race that week. And I'm like, all right, I'm in. Let's go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, I definitely want to go. And you'll get that same kind of sensation coming out to Killington, Palmerton, even West Virginia. The views are absolutely amazing. And it's usually right around the point that you get to the top of Stairway to Sparta. At one point, my first time running the trifecta weekend in West Virginia, I was running open. I'm like, I'm going to take my phone just so I can get a picture from the top of Stairway to Sparta because it is so incredibly gorgeous. And it just rejuvenates you.
Yeah, they do that at Montana. It's the A-frame though. They almost always put the A-frame at the very top, the peak of the highest point you're going to be, where you can stand there and look out over the entire Flathead Lake, and it's just a gorgeous view. So Montana last year, I did the stupid thing. A friend told me that he didn't think I could ruck an entire race. I bet you I can ruck an entire weekend. So I did the entire trifecta weekend in Montana with a 20-pound ruck.
Wow.
So, stupidest idea I ever had. Stupidest idea.
That is completely insane. I would not be doing that.
No. But it's like I said, I was trying to challenge myself. I've kind of hit that point, like I said, outside my comfort zone. And I've been trying to find that outside my comfort zone. So, and that was an attempt. And I'm like, no, this is too far outside. This was too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, everybody, Pretty Mike got so far into that episode, he got one question answered, and we had to go ahead and end the episode. Tune in later this week to hear the rest of it.
Thanks for listening to the BeastNet podcast. If you haven't done it yet, find us on Facebook, like and share the podcast. Give us a review on iTunes or Spotify. All these things will help to expand the show in the future. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear.